You know, history's battlefields are just filled with these epic stories of courage and, of course, massive firepower. But honestly, some of the most effective tactics weren't about bigger guns at all. They were about weirder ideas. So today, we're gonna dig into some military strategies that are so bizarre you'll have a hard time believing they're actually real. But first, before we get into all that clever stuff, let's just talk about pure, raw power. We all have an idea of what a bullet can do, right? But have you ever seriously wondered, if you just fired one straight down into the dirt, how deep could it possibly go? Okay, so check this out. The answer is pretty wild. A regular bullet? It'll burrow maybe a foot down. A high-powered sniper round gets you to about 3.5 feet. A big old shell from a World War II Tiger tank? Over 16 feet. But then you have the bunker buster. We are talking 200 feet. That is like taking a 20-story building and just driving it straight into the earth. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. But you know, all that incredible power is totally useless if you can't find your target. And that brings us to a tactic of pure psychological warfare, where the enemy could literally be anywhere, even right under your feet. So this leads to a really strange question. I mean, think about it. Under what possible circumstances would a soldier agree to let his own friends bury him alive? Well, the answer is this Viet Cong ambush tactic. And the details here are just, wow. Can you imagine the discipline it took? A soldier gets into what they called a spider hole. His comrades cover him completely with dirt, and his only connection to the outside world is this tiny hidden pipe for air. And then he just waits for the enemy to walk right over him. And for a while, it was a terrifyingly effective ambush. But of course, American GIs eventually learned what to look for. Those small, almost invisible breathing pipes sticking out of the ground. They realized they could just fire into the ground near the pipes to neutralize the threat before it ever had a chance to strike. It's that kind of battlefield ingenuity that's so fascinating, right? But sometimes military problems have nothing to do with the enemy. For our next story, we're going to do a complete 180, from the sweltering jungle to the freezing cold of a Soviet military parade, to see a solution for a very different kind of danger. So if you've ever seen footage of those huge Soviet parades in Red Square, you might have noticed something a little odd. The soldiers are holding their rifles at this very specific kind of dramatic 60-degree angle. Now, it looks crisp and professional, for sure, but that wasn't for show. It was actually a life-saving safety measure. Here's the deal. In the brutal, freezing cold of a Russian winter, the lubricating oil inside their rifles would get thick, almost like sledge. This could actually cause the firing pin to stick forward, and then all it took was one hard jolt from a marching step to make the rifle go off completely by accident. And that 60-degree angle, that was the brilliantly simple solution. It made sure that if a rifle did accidentally fire, the bullet would just go harmlessly up into the sky, instead of straight into the back of the soldier marching right in front of them. So simple, so effective, and it probably saved a whole lot of lives. That Soviet solution is a perfect example of how a simple adjustment can solve a really complex problem. And our final story, this one from the battlefields of World War II, takes that whole idea of low-tech ingenuity to a completely different level. Okay, so picture this. During the North African campaign, British troops were facing these deadly German landmines hidden under the sand. Their secret weapon against this threat? Something you could find in pretty much any house, a simple bucket. How on earth did that work? It all came down to incredibly simple physics. It's brilliant. As you can see here, they just placed a bucket upside down on the sand, and that turned it into a makeshift amplifier. Then, by tapping the ground nearby, they could listen to the sound. Solid ground made one kind of sound. But if there was a mine buried underneath, the hollow space created a totally different, telltale resonance, revealing the danger without them ever having to get close. You know, from soldiers literally being buried alive to guys with buckets finding landmines, these stories really prove that ingenuity is often a much more powerful weapon than just brute force. And it just leaves you with one question, doesn't it? What other unbelievable tactics are still out there, just hidden away in the pages of history?